very much. Thank you. Can you hear me? Lovely to be introduced by a fellow Canadian, I must say, because I am from Canada. This is why I speak a little bit with an accent, because I'm French-Canadian. I can't see any of you. I thought I was in the starlight room, the little fairy lights on the ceiling, so I can't see you. But I'm going to ask you lots of questions. I want you to talk to me as much as I talk to you. And today I came to talk to you about, sorry about my wellies, but I came with my little ballerina shoes, and I was a bit shocked on Saturday. So here I am in Hay, and I will talk to you about my latest book, How Animals Live. So I'm a children's author, but I don't write stories. I write non-fiction books. And a lot of people ask me all the time, you know, why do you write non-fiction books instead of stories about pirates and dragons? And the reason is, when I was young, I'm originally from Quebec, so Quebec City is a small city in Canada where we speak French, and we are surrounded by mountains and rivers and forests. And as a child, I was always going fishing. My father used to take me to the lakes up in the north. It sounds very jet set, in a seaplane. And we'd land on the lake, and we'd stay there for 2 weeks fishing. And we would have lots of animals around us. We had moose and beavers, and even when we went to the toilet, we were in a little log cabin. We went to the toilet. Often there was a bear with the cubs. I was surrounded by nature. So I was always interested in nature. And also as a child, I was a little bit naughty. So I wouldn't encourage you to do the same as me. But I was often naughty, and I was just sent I was in a very, very strict school run by nuns. And I was always sent, you know, to be punished to the library to copy books. In those days, that's what they made you do when you did something naughty. So I spent hours copying non-fiction books. It was so boring. So I always wanted to write stories. And then I thought, I will write non-fiction books because they could be quite interesting. And the world is so interesting. So I thought, this is what I'm going to do. I always wanted to be a writer, and I always wanted to write little stories, and I was doodling, and then when I came to the UK, I came to study here, stayed here, and I was working for an organization called WWF, you know, the little panda, where our role was to go to schools and to children and talk about nature and the environment and so on. And again, I was using books that were a lot of them were boring. There weren't many books that were exciting. Most books were about, you know, where we find volcanoes in the world, or where, you know, hurricanes happen, but not explaining why it happens. So I decided to write books for schools and children about the world around us, the environment. And this is the first picture that really, you know, as an author, often people ask you, where did you get your inspiration? And for me, when I was about your age, we just started to have colored TVs. This is how old I am. So I remember the colored TV, and I remember the first man that landed on the moon. So for you, I'm sure you've seen that picture before. But when I was a little girl and I saw that, I thought that was amazing, because not only we see the Earth, but we see that it's a whole. You know, there's water and clouds and, you know, ocean, but it's all linked together. And I also saw we're a tiny, tiny little animal on this planet, like the other animals. So that was very inspiring. So today I'm going to talk to you about how animals live. But I want it to be quite fun. I want you to talk to me as well as much as I talk to you. And I started with a quiz. So my books, I don't know, does anybody know my books? Has anybody ever read one of my books? Put your hand up. Oh, fantastic. So you're going to discover them today, a lot of them. But what I do is they're pop-up books. So I'm very lucky because I don't have only 2 pages to work with. I have a lot of three-dimension books. So I work with someone who's called a paper engineer. That's his job. And he's called Andy. And I say to Andy, I love to have the rainforest, but not flat on a page. I want it to be in 3 dimensions. And he does that. So I'm going to take you through this book today. And I will start with a little game about animals, to know how much you know about animals. So I'm going to put the book here so you can see. So let's start with what I've done a close-up on different animals, and I want you to guess what they are. So that's my book. I love this bouncing thing, so there's a lot of bouncing in my presentation. So who am I? So we're going to look at these pictures and see if you can figure out what they are. I think there are people with microphones, but I can't see them. So, yeah, it's okay. So this is it. We're going to go through these, and I've done a close-up, and I want you to guess what they are. That's the first one. I'm very sleepy, rarely touch the floor, and love hanging upside down. Who am I?
Is it a sloth?
Yeah, sorry?
A sloth.
Yes, a sloth. It is a sloth. And a sloth is an amazing animal because, you know, animals that are very slow, they're quite, you know, they stay in their little nest or their trio. The sloth, what is really interesting, it comes down once a week on the ground. Very, very slowly. It must be the slowest animal on the planet. It climbs down the tree. Why do you think they do that? Why do they come to the ground once a week? Does anybody know? Yes?
For the food.
To eat? No, because they stay in the tree and they eat leaves. So that's why they spend their whole day hanging upside down, sleeping and eating leaves. But they come to the ground once a week to do something.
To go to the toilet.
Yes! And everybody, even David Attenborough, has studied them and they wonder, why don't they do it up in the trees? They come down and they're very vulnerable because they move so slowly. But what is really interesting, if you look at their fur, you see the trees covered with algae. And the sloth is so slow that algae grow on the fur so they can blend in with the tree, and that hides them. So that's the way of protecting itself. But where does it live? Where do they live, sloths? Do you know? Does anybody know? Yes?
In the rainforest?
Yes, they live in the rainforest. So if you imagine a very, very slow animal climbing down to the ground once a week, not doing much more than sleeping and eating, if we cut down the rainforest, this animal has got a problem. And at the moment, we're cutting the rainforest. It's three football pitches every minute. So we are cutting the forest. So we need to protect the forest to protect these animals because they wouldn't be able to adapt to another environment. So the other one, oh, my spiky tail is a handy weapon and a perfect tool to block the entrance of my burrow and keep it cool. Who I am?
Is it a lizard?
Yes, it is. But it's a very interesting kind of lizard. It's a lizard that lives in the Sahara. It's called the spiny-tailed lizard. And what is interesting about it, do you see the tail? It's quite fat. So it's a handy weapon if it's attacked by something. And it also helps to block the entrance to the burrow. So if they want to go to sleep, they don't have to worry about a predator coming to eat them. So that's why it's called the spiny-tailed lizard. Then another one. Oh. Born in a gravelly river, I swim to the ocean and can find my way back to the same river years later. What animal does that?
Salmon?
A salmon. Salmon are so clever. They are born in a river. Then a few years later, they swim all the way to sea in the ocean, in salt water. And then years later, they come back to the river to breed. But again, it's harder and harder for them to do so if the rivers are polluted and if we build dams. Because we know we build dams on river to produce electricity. But what is fantastic is we are starting to realize it's important to create channels for these salmon. So there are hydroelectricity dams where they leave a little channel for the salmon to come back to the river and breed. Because it's so important in their life cycle. The Atlantic salmon. Then this one, I have quite an easy one. I'm big, white, and furry, and the thick blubber under my skin helps to keep warm. Yes?
Polar bear.
Yes, the polar bear. That's quite an easy one. But the polar bear is a fantastic animal because look at it. It's perfectly adapted to cold. First of all, it's white, so we don't see it well, you know, in the North Pole. It's got big paws, so when it goes in the snow, it doesn't sink. And as a child, I remember I come from a country where there's a lot of snow, and we wear snowshoes to go and walk in the fields because otherwise you sink. So the bear is designed like that. They have big paws, they have a coat that sheds oil because they go swimming in really, really cold water, then they have to dry out quickly. And they are all done, they have an amazing eyesight, a sense of smell. What do they eat, polar bears? Do you know? Yes, you? Seals. So to go and catch them, they have to go on the ice sometimes. And now if the North Pole, as you may have heard, the North Pole is getting warmer, and it's harder for the bear to go and get the food because they have to go further to get their food. And then, I wonder if that's one. I am very large, but only feed on plants. I roll in the mud to keep nasty bugs at bay. What is it?
A rhino.
Yes, a black rhino. You are very good, or I'm not very good at PowerPoint presentations. You won't guess them. So I'll make them harder next time. That's the black rhino. Black rhinos are in danger, you might have heard. There are so many television programs telling us about that, but sometimes we feel it's really far away, but it's in all areas of the planet. Animals need a place to live. And the black rhino is in danger because they're hunted for their horns, and they make medicine out of it in some countries, so that's why they kill the rhinos. There are only 3,000 rhinos in the wild left, so it's quite important to protect them. So if I show you, oh, there's another one. I live almost everywhere on the planet, eat almost everything, and breed really fast. Maybe some of them breed near your house.
Rat.
Yes. I don't like rats. I think they're horrible, but they are amazing animals because they're nearly everywhere. The only place I think they don't live is the North Pole and South Pole, and they can adapt to the water, they can jump from really high walls, high buildings. They're amazing animals, but they're not, I don't know why, I think I've got a phobia. I don't like rats, brown rats. So, in fact, I can do a little story. I'll tell you a little story that once a friend of mine had rats. She was keeping them in her house, and she was going sailing on a boat on a holiday, and she had 3 rats in a big cage like that, and she said, Christiane, could you look after them? And I said, no problem, I'll look after them. So I came back to my house, and I said to my boys, could you look after them? Because I couldn't go near them. And my boys didn't want to, no, but because we didn't like the rats. And we took them to the pet shop, and I had to pay £5 a day to have them looked after for my friend. So why are some places more popular than others? If we start by thinking, when I wrote this book, I thought, why are there animals are everywhere on the planet? What do they need to live? What do animals need to live? Can someone tell me? I think someone is taking the microphone because I can't see a thing. Yes, what do they need to live?
Water.
Water. What
Food.
else? Yes, food. What else?
Shelter.
Shelter. And what do we need? I think we're an animal. If I do that, I am breathing. What do I need?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. So that's what we need. So it's very simple. We need food, we need water, we need shelter, we need oxygen, and we need mates. That's what we need. So why are some places more popular than others? This is in my book. If you look at it, so the Earth travels around the sun, and the sun shines on the Earth. But some areas, like the equator, it's direct sunshine. So there's sun all year round, it's warm, there's plenty of water, plenty of oxygen with the forest, plenty of places where to hide because there's a big forest around the equator. And if the sun shines the North Pole, it's not as direct, it's colder. So some parts of the Earth have got a lot of sunshine, others less so. And then the Earth travels around the sun, and as you know, the Earth is tilted. So some areas get more sun certain times of the year, and others don't at all. So what is in like the South Pole and the North Pole, it's colder because they're further away from the sun. And if you look at the fact that the Earth rotates and travels around the sun, it creates lots of different habitats around the Earth. So if you look at hay, if I took you on a field here near hay, we could look at a little patch of the field. You'd have lots of insects and animals, small animals, that you wouldn't have in the rainforest because they're adapted differently. So animals adapt to their environment in amazing ways. And when I wrote my book, I just think this is what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to look at how it varies on the planet to these different habitats and how animals have adapted. So why is the rainforest so popular? What is it that there are so... Do you know there's half of the world's species live in the rainforest? Why is that so? Who knows? Yes? There are so many different habitats. Well done. Because we think it's a big forest, but in fact the rainforest, this is my pop-up in my book, there are different habitats. You've got the harpy eagle, for instance, at the top. it lives in the trees, at the top of the trees, because it flies over the forest to look for food, and it's got really, really good vision. So it can spot monkeys and sloths, and it can flies over the trees, grab them, and eat them. It even takes its prey back to the nest to eat. So they live mostly at the top of the forest. Then you have the canopy. You know, we looked at the sloth. The sloth has got really big claws to climb on trees, because as you know, they come to the forest floor once a week. So they have to climb down and climb up the trees. And then the monkey there has got this tail that can wrap itself around the tree. It's called a prehensile tail. And it means that they can use it as an extra limb, so they can hang on a tree and use their hands to find fruit and plants and flowers. And then you have the forest floor with all these animals looking for food, but also the little tiny animals that help to create soil by taking fallen fruit or flowers and transforming that into soil so new trees can grow. So it's an amazing habitat, the rainforest, because you've got lots of different layers with different animals who are adapted in wonderful ways. Now, what about the desert? Do you know any animals that live in the desert? Yes? Sorry? Camels? Yes?
Crocodiles.
Crocodiles? In rivers, don't they? Crocodiles?
Lizards.
Yes?
Scorpion.
Scorpions. So there are lots of animals. But when you look at the spread here, it doesn't look like it. But in the book, what is lovely is that you can lift, there are lots of flaps. So they're all hiding everywhere. You see how they're hiding? And then if you open this is the desert in the day, but at night time, look what happens. All these animals come out at night time because it's cooler. And I showed you the little lizard at the beginning. Often in the day they go into their burrows. They dig a hole in the sand, and then they come out at night to hunt or find their food. So how do they survive in the desert? How do animals keep cool? Does anyone know? There's a little booklet there talking about that. Does anyone know?
They're cold-blooded.
Cold-blooded. So what does it mean, cold-blooded? Can you explain? Do you know? What do they do to regulate their temperature? They're cold-blooded, so they go in the sun when they need it, and they go out of the sun if they want to keep cool. So that's a good point. They're cold-blooded. What else? Yes? You? Do you want to go there? It's hard when you're in the middle because you never get the microphone.
They go underground.
They go underground, that's it. That's it. Is that what she shouted? Yeah. They go underground. So there are lots of different tactics to keep cool. I think if we went in the desert, we would find it very hard because we are not cold-blooded. We can't dig a hole in the ground and except if you're Bear Grylls, you can manage to do that. But the different animals I put in my book, I did a little booklet to different tactics. So keeping cool. This vulture, it's an Egyptian vulture, and it just wheezes on its leg. So it makes him cool. Just like you do with the host on a summer day where it's hot. Well, he wheezes on its leg, and then he's cooler like that. This one, it's an addax. But what is amazing, it rarely drinks any water at all because it gets all the water from the plants it eats. This one, a little gerbil, it's called the fat-tailed gerbil. You know, an animal like a polar bear has got a lot of blubber and a lot of fat. Well, these animals in the desert, they're very skinny because they don't want too much fat around their body to keep warm. So this little gerbil keeps all the fat in its tail. So it's like a reserve of energy. And this is the true expert of the desert. You said it, the camel. The camel is although there aren't many camels in the wild anymore, but we use them to carry things across the desert. And what is amazing? Why does it have a hump there? Do you know what's in the hump? That's
water.
No, that's a tricky question. Even when I started my book, I was going to write water, and I researched it. It isn't. Yes? Fat. So you see, the gerbil keeps the fat in its tail, and the camel keeps it in its hump. So it's like a reserve of energy if they don't find food easily. They also have very long eyelashes. I don't know if you've ever noticed, because of the sand and the wind. And they have very tough lips, so they can eat thorny plants. And they have paws, a bit like the polar bear. They have paws that don't sink in the sand. And they're a nice color also because they blended with the desert. So they're an amazing animal. And they can even close their nostrils so that if there's no sand coming in their nose. So they're very well adapted. And the more you work as an author, the more you research a subject like that, the more you realize how fantastic nature is because they are perfectly adapted to the desert. Now, who likes their water salty? This is another one that I've done Andy did a beautiful pop-up for me. So you can see here in the sea. So you've got this is the ocean. And as we know, a lot of animals, I'm sure you've seen lots of animals and fish that live in the sea, but 2/3 of the earth is covered with water. And there are so many animals in the ocean that we haven't discovered them all. I put in my book, I've got a trench. So if you open this, you can see lots of animals that live deep, deep in the ocean that we haven't seen yet. We haven't discovered them yet. So when you look at the ocean, we think it's a big puddle of water. But in fact, it's lots of different habitats. And you have the fish that live in the coral reef. That's the best place for fish to be because there are lots of places where they can hide. There's lots of food. But then at the top of the water, top of the ocean, lots of animals live there. And it's incredible. Like if you notice, next time you look at a fish, the top of the fish is dark and the belly is pale. Do you know why? I'm asking you lots of difficult questions. Here, there's someone. Why is it pale on their tummy and dark on their back? Yes?
Is it because of the sun? Is it because the sun heats the back, but it doesn't get to the bottom part?
It is linked to the sun, but if you look down in the water, it's dark, isn't it? So when you look at the fish, you see that the top is dark, so they blend in. And if you go deeper in the water and you look up, you see it's sunlit, so you don't see the pale bit of the fish, so it's camouflage. So it's very clever. So all the fish that live at the surface are like that. And then we have the deep sea, we have the coral reefs, so even in the ocean there are so many different habitats. We talked about the rainforest, but the ocean is the same. So in my book, I thought I would do a little booklet of the weird and wonderful, because I think the ugliest animals are in the sea. But you may not agree with me. They are still important. Have you ever seen the blobfish? The blobfish is an interesting animal because it lives really, really deep. And the reason why it's blob, it's like jelly, if he had a skeleton, he wouldn't survive because of the pressure from the water. There's a lot of water above. So the blobfish lives at the bottom, and it bobs along the floor, the ocean floor, getting food from above. So it's a big bag of jelly without a bone structure, but it's an amazing animal, though, to survive that deep with that amount of water above its head. This is the leafy sea dragon, which is amazing because it looks like a plant, doesn't it? But it's actually an animal, and it's the reason why it looks like a seaweed is for camouflage. It doesn't get eaten. In fact, a lot of the animals, they either eat or they survive. They try to find places not to get eaten. And that's why this is fantastic camouflage. It's the master of disguise. This is the porcupine fish, which is a funny little fish that it inflates itself in a prickly balloon, not to be eaten. So it's just to tell the predator, don't eat me because I'm a prickly balloon, basically. And the last one, the anglefish, which is again another one of those that lives and there are lots more in my books, you can many of them. But the anglefish, what I thought was really interesting, is that it's only the female that has the little fishing rod. So maybe the female gets the food. And then they have a little bone sticking out like that. Do you see the bone with the little light at the top? Well, that's a bit of bone. And then at the top you have a bit of flesh. And then you have lots of bacteria that are so clever that they can create light. So this fish that lives at the bottom of the sea there has got this little fishing rod, and it dangles it to attract other fish, come to see me, and the moment the fish come close, then they just eat them. And they can eat a fish twice their size. So they're quite vicious, but they don't worry if you go swimming in the sea because they live in deep trenches where you would never meet them. And this, if you think of the depth, it's about 11 kilometers. It's quite a long way. You could put Mount Everest in there and there'll still be a lot of water over. So we can't go deep there. More people have been into space, into the moon, than the deep sea. So maybe that's a nice thing for you to do when you're older if you want to be to discover new species at the bottom of the sea. There are plenty to be discovered. Isn't it a bit chilly here? So that's the North Pole and the South Pole. So you know lots of animals from there. Again, you know a lot of them are white to blend in with the ice. You got the penguins in the South Pole. So in there, in fact, all these animals that I've shown on my spread here, none of them always live on the continent, because they go in the sea, they come back on land, they go in the sea, they come back on land. Some animals go there just for the summer, because they want to nest quietly, or they want to just be quiet, not be attacked by predators, so they move to the North Pole, or they move to the South Pole. There's one little bird that is absolutely amazing, that does every year, goes from the North Pole to the South Pole and back, the Arctic tern. And it's a little bird, and they always follow the summer. So they go the summer when in Antarctica, then they go the summer in the North Pole. But the true residents, so I've done a little booklet here about the true residents of Antarctica. And I don't know if you have ever come across these animals. The tardigrade. To see these animals, you need a microscope. They're tiny, they're microscopic animals. But they are amazing, and scientists are studying them because they are so resistant. They're the toughest animals on Earth. They can survive the cold weather, the extreme, and they have adapted in ways that are amazing. And in fact, the tardigrade went to space and back without oxygen, without anything, and survived. So scientists are studying these microscopic animals because they're fascinating. The 8-legged mite can hibernate its body. So it looks like it's insignificant because it's a tiny thing that is microscopic, but it can hibernate. So when it gets really cold, they just hibernate, and when it gets warmer, they just wake up, like bears do. But really extreme cold. Wingless midge, that's another one that can do the same. And then this one, the springtail, it's got something in its body, like an antifreeze. You know, you don't use that very often in England, but in Canada, when we use our car, we have to put antifreeze in the car, because otherwise, you know, the stuff that we put to clean our windows get frozen, and so we have to use antifreeze. And some animals produce it themselves. So when they are in the South Pole, when it's really, really cold, they can produce some stuff so they can carry on living through the whole winter. So they are amazing animals. So you have a little booklet with some more in there. The rotifer is the same. The rotifer lives in moss in Antarctica, and then when it gets cold, it freezes. When it gets warmer, it thaws, like the moss around it. So they're amazing creatures. What's in a grassland apart from grass? So in the savannah, there are lots of animals that we love, like, you know, the big lions and the giraffes and so on. So in my book, and I've done a little game here, spot the difference. So lots of these animals, that is amazing about the savannah, lots of these animals only eat grass and plants. So you would think there are so many animals there that would be a good menu in your diet, but they don't. A lot of them just eat plants and grass, and they are herbivores, and often they don't even eat the same bits of the plants, so they don't compete against each other, and they can happily live together, except for a few. I'm sure that you can see some on my spread. What animal can you see there that eats meat? Is there someone with it? Yes, in the back, yes?
Cheetah.
The cheetah. So the cheetah is quite happy there, isn't he? Because he can just help himself. Look at all these big animals. Yes?
Lion.
The lion. So a few animals are carnivores, so they eat meat, but a lot of them are herbivore. And in the savannah, what is fantastic is that a lot of animals help each other. So you can see the big buffalo there, and there's a little bird on top of the buffalo. Well, the buffalo has got lots of bugs on his back that really nags him. It's like when you get bitten by mosquitoes. So the little bird comes and eats them, so it's really good. So he likes having it on his back. But at the same time, if the buffalo is eating, the bird will warn it if there's an animal like a lion or cheetah coming. So they work together as a team. And in the savannah, it happens because there are so many animals living together in the same environment. I've done a little game in my book that I would love you to tell. A lot of them have got patterns. Do you see they have spots and stripes for disguise? So we don't see them as well with all the spots and stripes. So which one is that one, do you think? Which one is that one, the first one? It's quite hard. You're far, aren't you?
A cheetah.
A cheetah, that's it. So you can see the spots of the cheetah as different from all the others. But the reason why it's got spots because it can blend in and it can hide. And I've done a little booklet. I love doing booklets, so there are lots of them that give you more information. But if you look here, there's hunting tactics, hunting techniques. And you can see how some of them do it by ambush, some of them do it in a group, and the lions are brilliant, how they go around their prey with their camouflage, and they just wait, and then they just grab their prey. So you've got a lot of different techniques that you can study. So the next one, that's an easy one. What is it? Yes?
A giraffe.
Yes?
Giraffe.
A giraffe. So that's easy. This one? Yes?
Is it a hyena?
Yes, a hyena. We know them well because of Lion King, don't we? The hyena. And this one?
Zebra.
Yes. The zebra, it's interesting. When we study animals, we're not quite sure why they have that. It's just our own idea of why they have stripes. But a lot of scientists are studying the zebras to find out why, and they're not quite sure. It could be that if they're all in a group together, you feel a bit dizzy looking at them, so it's harder to grab one. They all have different stripes. It could be to recognize each other. So we're not quite sure why they have that. And the last one? I love this one. Leopard. And I'm going to show you something that you can come and have a look at later on. I'm going to put it there, but I've got here something to show you. It's not from my house, don't worry. There's a leopard. So you can come and have a look at the skin here. I brought it because I also work for WWF, as I said to you. And what we do is when often these things are bought around the world and we're not allowed, it's illegal to hunt leopards. And then when they try to go through the customs at the airport with the leopard skin, they are seized. And then they're given to WWF. And we're using that to show people. But you can see the pattern and you can come and strike. When you come out later on, you can come and have a look at it. Who lives in the urban jungle? The urban jungle, it's cities. Who live in cities? Can you name animals that live in cities?
Foxes.
Foxes. What else? Just one behind you there. Yes?
Pigeons.
Pigeons. Yes.
Rats.
Yes, rats. And who lives in a city here? Can you put your hand up if you live in a city? Well, we are animals, aren't we? And we live in cities. So I've done a whole spread, again, about different animals that live in cities. And this is wild animals as well as pets. We have dogs, cats, and pigeons. But what is interesting is that cities are not bad places for animals, because there's a lot of ditches, places where they have water, there's a lot of food in our bin, all the stuff we throw in our bin, foxes can eat them, there's lots of places to hide, so it's not that bad. The problem is that the more people we have on the planet, the more we are building bigger cities and we're taking land from other animals, so their habitats are getting smaller and smaller, and we are cutting the forest to grow food, so we are competing with them. So in fact, that's the problem. Now, we're also breaking some, we call it fragmenting habitats, that, for instance, toads or frogs that try to go back to the pond, if there's a road crossing between them and the pond, it's quite hard for them to go back to it. So this is what we have to think about, and if I take you back to my first picture of the Earth, seen from the moon, where we can see we're one animal on the planet with lots of other animals. This is why I write these books, to try to find out more about animals, but also what we can do to help protect them and protect other habitats. So that is a bit depressing, but I've got good news after that. But going, gone. So some animals have disappeared already. This is the Tasmanian tiger. Don't know if you've ever seen it, but the last one died in 1939, and it was an animal that lived in Tasmania. And when we introduced dogs on the island, then the dogs hunted the Tasmanian tigers, and they went extinct. And it's not that far. It's about 70 years ago that the last one died. This is the quagga, that is a little bit like a zebra and a little bit like a horse. And again, it lived in South Africa, and they were hunted, and now they aren't anymore on the planet. And you know this one, don't you? The dodo. I love the dodo. I think you can see one at the Natural History Museum in London. But what is interesting about the dodo, it can't fly, But when it was on Mauritius, on this island, Mauritius, it was fine because there was nobody that was trying to eat it. But the moment we went there with other animals, we just, it just disappeared. Yes, you got a question? Yes, that's it. They hunted them so they could eat them. So it's because humans hunted them and they could eat them, and eventually they can't fly, so they can't run away. So we got a bit of an advantage, haven't we, to try to catch them. And there are more that are disappearing. The frog, this little frog in Panama, this orangutan, and the Tasmanian devil. Do you know Taz? I don't know if it's still on television or not, but my children loved it. But it's based on an animal that was a real animal that is nearly disappearing because, again, people killed the Taz, or the Tasmanian devil, because it competes with us. It eats the crops that we plant, or it eats the cattle that we want to keep. So we compete, so we kill them. So they are nearly disappearing now. So we need to make sure it doesn't happen. But the good news, as I said about the ocean, is the same about the rainforest. Do you know in the last 4 years, we've discovered 100 species, new species a year? 400 species in 4 years. Some of them, they're not that fantastic as you'll think. It's a little insect or it's a little frog, as small as my hand. But they are very interesting. This is a piranha, but a vegetarian one, so it eats plants. Then we've discovered this little monkey that is so small, you could put in your hand and it purrs like a cat. So if you strike it, it will purr like a cat. This is the bald parrot. So it doesn't have any feather on its head, but that's a new one that we've discovered recently. And the tarantula with blue fang, that's a new species we've discovered, I think, 4 years ago. A little frog and a giant stick insect. So we keep discovering new animals, but that's why it's so important to protect the forest. It's not only the animals that are there, it's all the other animals we don't know anything about. So what can we do? What can we do to help? Because I've talked to you about all the different habitats on the planet. It's far from here, isn't it? The North Pole, the South Pole, the rainforest. But what can we do to help other animals? Can anybody tell me? Yes? We need a microphone. Could we go? This one first.
Stop using paper.
Stop?
Stop using so much paper.
So much? Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Why? Because where does paper come from? Trees. That's true. Or we can recycle the paper, can we? Yes, next one.
Plant more trees.
Plant more trees, because that will help the forest. It will help lots of animals who need places to hide and nest. Yes? Not buy leopard skin.
Adopt
Adopt?
an animal.
Adopt an animal. Yes. So we make sure that we can protect it. I'm doing a big advertisement for WWF. But you can adopt an animal and give some money to make sure that we protect the habitat. Yes? Another one, I'm going to take another one, because I want to leave enough time for questions.
Are we going to have go vegetarian?
Oh, that's a good point. Go vegetarian. But that's what is difficult with all this, because lots of these animals we don't eat, and we breed animals to eat. But there's a big question. We're 7 billion of us on the planet. We'll have more people in 10 years, but it's thinking of the way we produce it, that it becomes, we can carry on breeding animals for the population and making sure that wild animals are protected. But I can show you other things that I've collected, but I don't know if you like these things. I had an elephant foot, so I left it at home, so I thought it would be better. But I have, do you know what that is? Do you know what that is? What is it made of? A nice little briefcase. What is it made of? It's elephant skin. So it's made from an elephant. But again, this is something we seize at the airport, because it is illegal. So that's quite good. We are good at protecting animals in some ways because it's illegal. I'm going to put it here so you can have a look at it when you come back, when you go out. Then I have another thing here. That's a hard one here. What is it? Look, it's beautifully decorated on the other side. You can tell me what it is.
Is it an elephant?
It's not an elephant. It's too small to be an elephant tusk. What is it?
It's to be a rhino tusk horn.
It looks like it, but it's a tooth of a hippo. And look, it's all been beautifully carved on the back. So it's just an ornament that people buy to put in their house. But they have to kill the hippo. And what is really interesting when I did my research for the book is that hippos actually eat grass. So it's quite amazing they have teeth like that. But they use it to defend themselves. So it's more like a weapon rather than a tooth to chew food with. So I'm going to put it there. And then I've got one more thing to show you. And I'm going to take some questions. What's that? Yes?
An elephant tusk?
Yes, beautiful, isn't it? And we kill elephants to get their tusk because it's made of something called ivory. And when you go out later on, you could just lift it to see how heavy it is. So we kill the elephant to get the ivory. And I feel very bad. I'm sure if you look in your home, we have things made of ivory, like piano. Pianos were sometimes made of ivory, and I've got a beautiful chess game made of ivory, but we are stopping that because we don't want people to kill elephants to get the ivory. But there's other things. So it's all remote, it's the rainforest and the North Pole. It feels very far away from us, doesn't it? What can we do where we live? So there are different ways of encouraging wildlife in our area. If you go back home and you look in your local park or your garden, try to see what is there around the pond. There are lots of animals in ponds. You can even build one in your garden. If you just lift a log or rotten logs, you can see lots of bugs and things. So you can discover a lot of wildlife just under the rotten wood. Do you know what that is? That's very cool. That's very trendy, that. New thing that everybody wants to have. Yes?
Beehive?
Yes, but more than bees.
Birdhouse?
It's an insect hotel. That's the new trend. But it's quite good because it attracts bees, so it is a bit like a beehive. It attracts bees and butterflies, and it provides a place for them to shelter in your garden. So you can build one very easily. If you Google and you go on the internet, you can build one very easily. And that you can put plants that attract butterflies, because butterflies are very important to spread flowers and plants. And then the last one, you can keep a little bit of your garden a bit untidy, so you attract ladybirds. And ladybirds are brilliant to kill insects that we don't want in our gardens. So that's different ways of doing it. And we've done, on your way out, does anybody know what a seed bomb is? Seed bomb. So, yes, what is it? You have to shout because you don't have a microphone.
It's a type of graffiti where you plant more seeds.
You can do it with clay and mud. And what is fun, you know what you do afterwards with it. So you put a lot of clay and soil and seeds of wildflower, and then you throw it. So you can have a fun thing throwing. But what you're going to do is to spread wildflowers everywhere. So you need to ask your parents first in the garden. But you could do it in your local wood, or it's just to encourage wildflowers so they attract bees and butterflies. So that's it. So I'm very happy to take questions. I've given you a bit of a flavor of my book, but there's much more in the book about the different habitats. But I wonder if you have any questions? I will leave a sheet, how to make a seed bomb. We're going to give them out at the end. So when you come out, you can take a sheet and try to do it at home. So should I take questions? Do you have any questions?
What's your favorite animal?
Oh, everybody asks me that. Oh, it's such a difficult question. Do you know what I'm going to say? I used to think it was the polar bear, but now I'm going to say the blobfish. Because I feel sorry for them. But I just think they are just all these animals that live in the deep sea trenches are absolutely amazing. So I think they've become my favorite animals. It's very hard to see. Yes, question, yeah?
Why doesn't the dodo fly?
The dodo doesn't fly because it doesn't have any wings to fly with. And that's quite an interesting question because you would think a bird should have wings to to be adapted to its environment. But the dodo, he just lived on this island, and in fact, it didn't need to fly because it was the biggest predator. There was nobody that wanted to eat it until we came along, and we brought other animals with us, dogs and cattle, and then they were attacked by other animals. But until then, they didn't need wings to fly with. Another question?
Why did you want to discover animals?
Why did I want to?
Discover animals.
Well, it's interesting. You know, I've done books about the world, and I've done books about the weather, and I've done books, and I just thought, my illustrator is brilliant about drawing animals, I thought. And also, it's quite an interesting topic to look at adaptation. There's so much to talk about. The problem I had is that it's very hard to write a book about animals, because you have so much to talk about. So you need to think what would interest people, and what is it that hasn't been talked about. So this is what I tried to do in the book. Yes?
What did you do at university to work with animals and stuff?
Oh, it's a good question, that. In fact, I did geography at university, and then I came here to study. I am from Quebec, so my language was French, and it's a bit sad because a lot of people in my country speak English, but I couldn't speak English. So I came to England to study English and to do a PhD, a long degree at university, looking at environmental education. So I'm not an expert on animals. What I studied is how to talk about animals and the natural environment. This is what really interests me. So I would be happy to write about anything that is linked to the natural world. And in fact, it would be nice if you could tell me, and anybody would want to tell me, what my next book should be about. Have you got any ideas that you'd like to read about? I've done the world, I've done how we make stuff, I've done animals. What would be a good book in your view? Can anybody tell me? Yes, here, there's a... Oh, that's such a good idea, the first person to walk on the moon. I could do one about space. Any other questions? We have 8 minutes left. I've got a big clock here.
Is the dodo in the same family as the ostrich because they can't fly?
Yes, it is. I don't know if it's the same family at all, but it's a good point. Ostrich can't fly either, but the ostriches, what they can do that they're very good is they're the birds that are the fastest on Earth. They can run very fast. Probably that's why they can run away from predators, whereas dodos were very slow. But it's another bird the only one now left that can't fly. You're right. Yes?
When did you start getting interested in animals?
Oh, you know, it's funny because my children would laugh because I never wanted a pet. I've been nagged for years to have dogs and cats and goldfish. I got a few stick insects and a few gerbils, but I never, because I'm very busy. I travel a lot, I work a lot, and I just think it was unfair to have animals in my house if I wasn't there. But I've always, since I was very little, I was very interested in animals, because as I talked about, I used to go fishing, and I remember being in this canoe with my father, and he would say, come on, you go further, and I was face to face with a moose. And I just think it's fascinating when I had the privilege to be with animals in their natural environment, and that's when I got interested, when I was very young, because I was surrounded by wildlife, and I was interested in animals outside, not in my house. Yes? Next one?
Why did people kill some animals?
Why do people kill some animals? Like these, you mean? Well, it's a good question. I think we have, in some countries, some people need to make money, and what they do is that they know that people in other countries will buy ivory things or will buy rugs like this, so they kill them to make money. So I think the problem is not the people who kill them as much as the people who buy all that stuff. Because if we carry on buying it, people will carry on killing them to sell them to different countries. And I think that's why they do it. They do it because a lot of them hunt to earn a living. But I think at WWF what we try to do is that if we stop buying them, and it's illegal, if we make rules in the world that we can't kill an elephant for its tusk, then people won't buy it anymore. It won't be possible. Yes?
What's your favourite book that you've wrote?
Sorry?
What's your favourite book that you've wrote?
Oh, what a good question. I think I did love the book about animals, because I always like the last book I've done is my favorite. But there was one book that I did, and I did a workshop this morning about how we make stuff. And what was interesting is that I wrote it and I couldn't find the information on the internet. So I had to call, the company that makes stuff. I had to call someone that makes paper. I had to call someone, a company that makes plastic, and I had to ask them to explain to me how to do it. And that's really fun when you write. Because when you write, you have to do a lot of research for these books, and there's a lot on the internet, which is quite easy to have. But I love going to talk to people, and they tell me about how they make stuff and how they could make it differently. So I did love that one. I think the one book that because I did my first book about the world, then I had my American publisher ask me to do how the weather works. And I thought, oh, how boring. So I thought, what can I say about the weather? And it became the most fascinating book, because it's good when you come to England. Often we talk about the weather, because it changes all the time. So it's a topic that is very important, because it does change about all the time, and it's quite nice to know why. So I found them all interesting, but it's always the latest book. I've done my last book I've done, which will be out in October, was fun, because it's how the world began. So I think it covers everything. There's nothing else to write. It's from the beginning of the universe, to the formation of the earth, to the evolution of life, civilizations, the Greeks, the Romans, all the way to the earth today in 9 pages. Probably the last one. Yes?
How do animals get their camouflage?
Where they get them in different ways. You can come and have a look at this later on to see all the little rosettes and the different colors, so they blend in with the surroundings. Some animals are amazing. I was working on a project with WWF where you have these birds called potus, and they just, if you look in books or on the internet, the potu, it goes on a dead branch and it puts its beak in the air and it looks like a dead branch. So a lot of animals do that. They are expert at camouflage by either staying still, and a lot of animals pretend to be other animals that are poisonous with their colors, so they blend in different ways. It's either because of their skin, their colors, or they will do something so they pretend to be an insect or a plant or something so they don't get eaten. There's a lot in the book about camouflage in different environments. Yes?
How does a male anglerfish eat without its light?
How does an anglerfish has the light?
Yeah, you mentioned the female.
Yes.
It's only the female that's got the light.
Yes, isn't that cool? Only the female.
So how does the male survive?
Well, I don't know. It has to rely on the female. But what is interesting is probably close, but the female is the bigger fish of the two, and it's got this little lantern. So when it does that, other fish come, because in the sea it's very, very dark. So when they see the light, they come close, and then she's got these amazing teeth, and she can swallow something twice its size. So probably she keeps a little bit for the male. This is my interpretation. But a lot of the stuff we learn about animals, it's how we see it. We don't know, because animals don't tell us. So it's a bit, scientists are studying all that and how they produce this light in the first place, which is really clever. Yeah?
Is it true? I thought it was true that the difference between cheetahs and leopard spots was that leopards just daub their spots on themselves.
What do they do, leopards?
I thought leopards daub their spots on themselves.
They do. They put their spots on themselves. They don't. It's there. But maybe when they get older, the spots get darker. There are lots of animals. That's an interesting point. A lot of animals, like the tapir that lives in the rainforest, when they're born, they have stripes, because they're quite little and they can be eaten very quickly. So they have stripes, and when they get older, they don't have the stripes anymore. So maybe with some animals, the spots get darker when they get older. Yes? Other question? 1 minute we have left.
How did you find out to learn about animals?
How I found out about animals? Well, I just use a lot of, the internet is fantastic, so there's a lot of information there, but I do find that a lot of information is not accurate, so I have to really find my sources. There are lots, if you want to know about animals, there are lots of websites where they can, like the National Geographic Archive, there are lots of websites we can find information, but I also use a lot of books. And I love all these programs on television. There are so many. Do you know David Attenborough? So isn't that fantastic? So I look at a lot of programs, but I find my information a lot on the internet. Is that okay? Well, should we do one more question? One more question.
Where's the most interesting place you visited?
Where?
Where have you visited that's interested you the most?
Where I visited?
That has interested you the most?
A place in the world, you mean? Oh, this is such a difficult question. You know, I get asked, I should think about it, shouldn't I? But I think I find anywhere in the world very interesting. But I think now if I had to go to one place, I would want to go to the rainforest. The Amazon rainforest. That would because there are so many species there and it's so interesting. Well, thank you so much for coming. So as I said, if you want to come on your way out to come and look at these things, and we can give you a sheet with the seed bomb to do in your own garden. Thank you very much. Oh, how sweet. Thank you very much. Thank you.